Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea holds a massive trade show for the drone industry. All the latest technology in one place, a chance to enjoy some drone performances and see how they're going to change the way we live. The government announces plans to bring down South Korea's mounting household debt, which has grown in the pandemic. Also to help young people buy homes, a new 40-year mortgage. And South Korea's big tech giants, Samsung and LG, announced record-breaking earnings for the first quarter. A big boost from sales of TVs, appliances, and smartphones. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The unmanned aircraft we call drones are going to be used more widely in our everyday lives in the future. They have many everyday applications already. Today, there's a huge gathering in Busan, South Korea, of companies involved in the making of drones and related technology, and they're showing off their latest innovations. Our Kim Do-yeon is on the ground there to see what they've got. Do-yeon, sounds like a lot of fun.
Devin, this must be the future. I'm out here at a convention center in Busan, and let me tell you, these drones are going to change our lives. Check this out. The one right behind me right there is powered by hydrogen fuel cells. That means it could fly up to 2 hours at a time and carry a load of up to 5 kilograms. This could change a lot of different things in different industries, including medicine, because I came across one of the most famous surgeons in South Korea, and he told me this is an exciting development for his profession.
It means that this drone is able to bring the patient's blood samples, and in other words, it can bring the specific medication or medical equipment to the scene from the hospital as well.
Other technologies being showcased include military, and an army officer told me that South Korea's military drone technology ranks 8th in the world, and unmanned equipment will allow more efficient ways to conduct operations.
Right now, the Army plans to fully push ahead with drone bot units by 2030. From 2018 to 2021, we believe we have laid a good foundation, and we will move forward from here to achieve it.
Well, Do-yeon, that sounds fascinating, and there must be so much to see there. So tell us more about the conference as a whole. How many different companies are there? What kind of other technologies are there?
Devin, there are 134 companies and institutions showcasing their technologies at 417 booths in total. This year's motto is Connected by Drone, because they're here to show what roles they can play in different industries. This includes municipal districts using them to boost public safety and law enforcement. Big companies like Korean Air and SK Telecom are not only showing off their drones, but also their new software products equipped with 5G that connect drones to control towers. There are also smaller companies making drones for the sea, and they're showing how they can help protect the environment. The audience got to hear about life and culture aspects like drone racing and drone soccer, with opportunities to try it out themselves. Also, many got to see drone performances with their own eyes for the very first time. Lastly, Drone Show Korea is organized by Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy, among other ministries, and this will continue until this Saturday. That's all I got for you at this hour. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Do-yeon, looks fascinating again, and we look forward to seeing what you have for us in the next newscast. Appreciate it. And South Korea's enormous level of household debt has grown at an even faster clip during the pandemic. It's a tall task, but the government is vowing to bring it down to pre-pandemic levels by next year. It also plans to make it easier for young people in South Korea to get on the property ladder by introducing new 40-year mortgages. Min Soo-kyun reports.
South Korea has announced plans to bring down the household debt growth to pre-COVID-19 levels. At a meeting Thursday morning, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said the government will work to keep the growth in household debt at around 4% next year. Hong acknowledged that the debt has been snowballing amid the COVID-19 outbreak. Last year, growth in household debt jumped to 7.9% from a 4.1% increase in 2019. This year, the government plans to limit it to 5 or 6% and slow the increase to about 4% by 2022. As part of efforts to limit the growth in household debt, the government will gradually impose stricter screening rules for loans. The finance minister added that the government will introduce the nation's first 40-year mortgage to help young people buy homes. This is to ease the burden of tightened lending standards and to reduce the burden of debt repayment on people with low incomes. Later on Thursday, the ministry also explained the details of the longer mortgages.
We will launch 40-year mortgages for young people and newlyweds from the second half of this year.
The Financial Services Commission is jointly planning the mortgage with banks and the Korea Housing Finance Corporation. Meanwhile, following the land speculation scandal linked to the state-run housing corporation, the government will also introduce new regulations for non-residential mortgages, such as loans to purchase land. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
And data shows South Korea's economy back at pre-pandemic levels of growth, and that seems to have businesses feeling better about the future. This month, business sentiment is the best it's been in almost 10 years. Kim Sung-min reports.
Business sentiment among South Korean companies has hit an almost 10-year high. The Bank of Korea said on Thursday that the business sentiment index for all industries in April was 88, the highest since June 2011. Despite the leap, however, the figure remains under 100, indicating that pessimists still outnumber optimists. The central bank attributed the increase to robust exports and growing domestic consumption. South Korea earlier posted an on-year jump in exports of around 45% in the first 20 days of April, backed by strong chips, automobiles, and oil products. By sector, BSI among manufacturers jumped 7 points to 96 thanks to higher chip prices and an increase in sports equipment sales. While all types of manufacturers had more positive sentiments than the previous month, conglomerates and exporters showed outstanding confidence, both exceeding 100. Sentiment among non-manufacturing businesses also rose by 5 points to 82 thanks to the strengthening construction sector. And with consumption bouncing back, the retail sector saw an increase of 8 points. Businesses also have a brighter outlook for next month, with their forecast for May coming to 89. The Economic Sentiment Index, which measures economic outlook for both companies and households, also surged 4 points in April to 105.3, largely due to strong exports. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
South Korea's two biggest electronics companies, Samsung and LG, have set new records with their first quarter earnings. Samsung Electronics says it posted sales of around $59 billion, up more than 18% on year. That's its highest first quarter sales figure on record. Its operating profit jumped by more than 45% on year to around $8.4 billion. That was largely thanks to strong sales of TVs, home appliances, and smartphones. As for LG Electronics, the first 3 months of this year were its best quarter ever in terms of both sales and operating profit. Sales came to $17 billion, an increase on year of nearly 28%, and operating profit was up 39% to $1.3 billion. Again, this was on sales of home appliances and TVs. The Federal Reserve has decided to keep interest rates where they are at around 0%, and they're going to stay there until the U.S. reaches full employment. Fed Chair Jay Powell says inflation's now at 2% and will likely go above that for a while. Kim Yo-sun reports.
The U.S. Federal Reserve decided Wednesday to hold its key interest rate unchanged at a range of 0 to 0.25%, while acknowledging recent progress in terms of growth and employment. It adds the rate will be maintained until its goals of maximum employment and 2% inflation are reached over the longer term.
With regard to interest rates, we continue to expect it will be appropriate to maintain the current 0 to 0.25% target range for the federal funds rate until labor market conditions have reached levels consistent with the committee's assessment of maximum employment, and inflation has risen to 2% and is on track to moderately exceed 2% for some time.
The Fed's policy-setting arm has held rates near zero since March last year, when the U.S. economy began to be severely impacted by the pandemic and related restrictions. The Federal Reserve chief also explained that the Fed plans to stick to its monthly asset purchases.
We will continue to increase our holdings of Treasury securities by at least $80 billion per month and of agency mortgage-backed securities by at least $40 billion per month, until substantial further progress has been made toward our maximum employment and price stability goals.
Although the Fed has noted there has been progress on employment, Powell noted that the U.S. is still a long way from full employment. Overall, however, he did hint that the pandemic's threat to the economy has diminished. He said risks remain, as opposed to a statement last month that COVID-19 posed, quote, considerable risks to the economic outlook. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, good afternoon. Thank you for making time today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, let's start with the earnings from Samsung. It's had its best quarter on record, operating profit up 45%, and it says it's looking to a rebound in its chip business in the second quarter. Tell us a little more about earnings at Samsung and what the next quarter might bring.
Samsung Electronics, the world's largest memory chip and smartphone manufacturer, had 7.1 trillion won, or 6.4 billion US dollars net profit in January-March period. This is up 45% from earlier. This robust business performance of Samsung Electronics is a kind of surprise because Samsung Electronics memory chip business was weaker due to memory chip price declines in first quarter. But instead, mobile, consumer electronics, and display divisions altogether posted best ever first quarter performances. Samsung Electronics also expects the memory chip unit is projected to see improved business in second quarter on the back of strong server demand worldwide.
And as we just heard, in the U.S., the Federal Reserve has decided to keep interest rates where they are, near zero. They're still waiting on inflation to come up to 2%, still waiting on full employment. But it's been a year since they cut rates at the start of the pandemic. Tell us about the Fed's latest decision.
U.S. Fed held its key interest rate near zero and said it plans to continue supporting the economic recovery while acknowledging progress in growth and employment. The Fed's decision of fixing interest rate is pretty much expected previously, so it did not much affect the market yesterday and today. Fed officials reiterated Wednesday that they will hold rate steady until the labor market is back to full employment and inflation has reached the central bank's goal of average 2%. Most of market participants indicated that they expect Fed to leave interest rate near 0% through 2023.
And now turning to the markets, stocks in New York closed a little lower on Wednesday, despite the Fed keeping rates low. As you said, this was an expected decision. This time it was the Dow falling the most, though, by about 0.5%. What's the story in the global markets?
There was a slight decline in U.S. market yesterday. Dow Jones, where blue chips are listed, decreased by 0.5%. And NASDAQ, where tech stocks are listed, also decreased by 0.3% in a single day. But Asian markets and European markets moved in the opposite way, over 0.2% to 0.6% positive returns. And this has been generated by U.S. Fed's key interest rate fix and U.S. Biden administration's $1.8 trillion size spending, additional spending actually, proposal on childcare, education, and paid leave.
And Korean stocks today were up and down during the session, but in the end we were lower across the board. The Kospi slipping further below that 3,200 point mark. The Kosdaq again under 1,000 points. Tell us about the local market.
Today, domestic market is much affected by U.S. market's negative return yesterday. domestic market had negative daily return over 3 straight days until today. Actually, in the morning session, Kospi has maintained marginally positive return, but it dropped down to negative return in the late afternoon. This is mostly due to foreigners and institutional investors' huge sales. Kospi dropped by 0.2%, and Kosdaq had negative 0.8% return today.
And let's talk about commodities for a minute, Professor. Oil prices are up a little bit, with U.S. inventories rising less than expected. The price of gold coming down a little bit too. So tell us what's happening in terms of gold and oil and your outlook.
International oil price increase as expected demand on crude oil increases. This increased demand for oil is driven by economic recovery after the end of the coronavirus pandemic. In addition, oil-producing countries' production cuts also helped to raise oil price these days. Western Texas Intermediate increased up to $63.86 per barrel, or 1.5% increase in a single day yesterday. Gold, which is considered as a safe haven asset under risky situation, declined yesterday by 0.3%. This decline of gold price is related to faster than expected economic recovery in U.S. Along with accelerating vaccination. So this kind of movements of international oil price and gold price will be continued for a while.
All right, Professor, we'll keep an eye on it. Thank you, as always, for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
People in South Korea starting today are able to purchase COVID-19 self-testing kits online and at pharmacies. The health authorities, though, are urging people not to use them as a substitute for going to a testing center if you need to. And with new coronavirus cases rising in recent days, they're going to announce new social distancing guidelines. Choi Won-jong has more.
Starting Thursday, COVID-19 self-testing kits can be purchased both online and offline. The self-testing kits, which are made by Korean drug maker Hanmi Pharmaceutical, will be on sales at local pharmacies and its online market. However, the health authorities are urging the public to use the testing kits cautiously.
COVID-19 self-testing kits should be used only as a supplementary test if individuals with respiratory symptoms are unable to take a COVID-19 test immediately. They've not been confirmed for use by asymptomatic individuals.
The users can get the results within 15 to 30 minutes, but the authorities are urging the public to visit local testing centers to get PCR tests for more accurate result. Meanwhile, South Korea added 680 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, dipping by almost 100 from the day before. All but 30 were locally transmitted. New cluster infections that are popping up at PC rooms, cramped schools, and kindergartens in the Greater Seoul area added to Thursday's figures. With more than 120 infections combined outside the capital region, including the cities of Busan and Ulsan, as well as the Gyeongsangnam-do province, the spread is showing no sign of slowing down, prompting the authority to consider new social distancing measures. They will announce whether to extend current measures again this Friday. The new guidelines will be in place for 3 weeks. Choi Won-jong, Arirang News.
The United States is planning to send more than $100 million worth of aid to India to help in its COVID-19 crisis. The White House said Wednesday that it includes more than 20 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's also going to send oxygen cylinders, rapid diagnostic tests, and millions of masks. These supplies will arrive over the next week. India is grappling with a devastating wave of the virus with a record 360,000 new reported cases over the past 24 hours alone. U.S. President Joe Biden gave his first address to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday, and in it, he said North Korea and Iran's nuclear programs are serious security threats. He also laid out more details of his $1.8 trillion American Families Plan. Jang Tae-hyun reports.
U.S. President Biden, in his first address to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday local time, called North Korea and Iran's nuclear programs a serious threat to U.S. and global security. He added that the U.S. will work with allies to address the issue.
We're going to be working closely with our allies to address the threats posed by both of these countries through diplomacy as well as stern deterrence.
In a speech focused on jobs, Biden also announced the American Families Plan, a proposal to invest $1.8 trillion to expand America's social safety net. It means more investment for education and paid leave, and features 2 years of free pre-kindergarten education as well as free community college for young adults. This will be paid for through higher taxes on the country's richest people. In addition to that, Biden's proposal includes $225 billion in child care assistance for U.S. families and monthly aid of at least $250 for parents. This is the second part of a two-part proposal designed to revive the country's economy amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to coronavirus restrictions, there were a limited number of lawmakers attending the event. Vice President Kamala Harris and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi sat behind the president, the first time for two women to sit behind the president at a joint address to Congress. Chang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong will be attending the G7 ministerial meeting in the UK next week. South Korea is not a member of the G7, but it's been invited along with Australia, India, and South Africa. The foreign ministers are meeting to prepare for the G7 summit slated for June, to which South Korea is also invited. They're also expected to discuss issues related to vaccines, climate change, and more. Chung might bring up the issue of Japan's plan to discharge contaminated water from Fukushima into the ocean. Japan's Yomiuri Shimbun reports that there will likely be a trilateral meeting there on the sidelines between the foreign ministers of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. And that would likely address issues related to North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. The Netherlands has become the latest European country to relax its COVID-19 lockdown. Bars and cafes can now reopen their outdoor terraces for the first time in 6 months. Elsewhere, Israel says all virus restrictions could be lifted in a matter of 3 weeks. Lee Sung-jae reports.
The Netherlands on Wednesday began relaxing its lockdown measures, despite infection rates and intensive care occupancy remaining relatively high. The country is the latest in Europe to start easing restrictions following Italy, Greece, and France, as they look to slowly edge away from lockdowns over the coming weeks. Under the new rules, bars and cafes are allowed to reopen their outdoor terraces for the first time in half a year. However, some restrictions remain. Terraces are only allowed to open between midday and 6 p.m. for a maximum of 2 socially distanced people per table, unless they're from the same household. In Israel, the country's Deputy Health Minister Yoav Kish forecast Wednesday that Israel will lift nearly all its COVID-19 restrictions in 3 weeks from now. Starting next week, Israelis holding a so-called Green Pass, showing they have been fully vaccinated or have recovered from COVID-19, will be free of any restrictions. According to Kish, if the number of cases continues to drop, the country will then lift all measures. Earlier this week, the Israeli government allowed children and those who cannot be vaccinated to attend cultural events, dine at restaurants, and enter gyms if they tested negative. Last week, the country's mass vaccination drive helped Israel lift its mask mandate in public places. In Asia, North Korea appears to have resumed in-person classes after the regime shifted classes online last year due to virus concerns. According to the North state-run newspaper, the Nodong Shimun, and the Korean Central TV broadcasting station, offline classes reopened in 87 schools in Pyeongbuk-do province. The North is likely to have reopened offline classes in other regions as well. While the regime has long claimed to be COVID-19 free, it has taken tough measures, such as imposing strict border controls since early last year. Lee Sung-jae, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.